Tonight,
it's a huge economic impact for the country.
the long-term implications of the Baltimore bridge collapse. Plus,
This is a wake-up call to the world to act, to do everything, and pressure Hamas.
the fight to free the hostages taken from Israel amid the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And
A beautiful thing can come out of what happened.
CBN News heads back to the scene of the Nashville school shooting 1 year later. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
The Baltimore bridge collapse and the American economy. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jenna Browder.
Good evening from Washington. I'm John Jessup. State and federal investigators are attempting to determine what caused the massive container ship to lose power and collide with the Francis Scott Key Bridge early Tuesday morning.
Search crews have now entered the recovery phase as they look for the 6 bodies of construction workers, all now presumed dead. And tonight there's growing concern about the potential economic fallout from the collapse. Tara Mergener joins us with tonight's top story. Tara?
John and Jenna, the Port of Baltimore is the nation's 17th largest in terms of cargo handled, and that includes more cars and trucks moving through there than any other U.S. port. Roughly 15,000 jobs depend directly on operations, with 140,000 linked to its overall activities. A day after the tragedy, the search for survivors becomes a search for closure.
This tragic event was completely unforeseen and was not something that we ever could imagine would happen. Our company is in mourning over the loss of these fine people.
Wednesday morning search for the missing construction workers ended due to weather conditions.
We do not believe that we're going to find any of these individuals still alive.
As recovery and cleanup efforts continue, Baltimore Harbor is expected to remain closed for at least a few days. Local, state, and federal leaders all bracing for the fallout.
This is not just impacting Maryland. This is impacting that farmer in Kentucky. It's impacting that auto dealer in Michigan. And so it is imperative that we get this bridge rebuilt. It's imperative that we get the Port of Baltimore back up and going.
While the bridge collapse is not expected to have a dramatic national impact, it is expected to create economic challenges. The port here set a record last year for the amount of foreign cargo coming in, including cars, heavy machinery, imported sugar, and gypsum.
It's one of the most important elements for the economy in the Northeast. I've directed my team to move heaven and earth to reopen the port and rebuild the bridge as soon as humanly possible.
In addition to disrupting port activity, the Key Bridge collapse eliminates a significant commuter route. Meantime, the NTSB is investigating what caused the power outage on the cargo ship, which took out its steering seconds before colliding with the bridge.
We are looking at the structure today. We will be boarding the vessel at some point today to begin to look at the devastation.
The swift action of dispatchers and officers immediately stopping traffic on the bridge are being praised as heroic.
There was a Mayday who literally, by being able to stop cars from coming over the bridge, these people are heroes.
And officials say there is no credible evidence at this point that the incident was terror-related. John and Jenna.
All right, Tara, thank you. Brent Moritz is a professor of supply chain management at Penn State, and he joins us now for more. Brent, welcome. So the Port of Baltimore now indefinitely closed to vessel traffic. What does this mean, Brent, for the supply chain, given that all of these ships now will have to reroute to other ports along the East Coast?
Sure. Well, this is a significant disruption to the Port of Baltimore and certain supply chain segments, as was mentioned in the report. It's also certainly a significant tragedy for the families of the 6 construction workers. However, it's probably not what I would call a supply chain catastrophe. So what's happening right now is there's a lot of rerouting going on in the supply chains for the auto industry, for the coal and other bulk materials industry. But it's not going to be quite a catastrophe as it would if, for example, the Port of New York was similarly disrupted.
You just mentioned the Port of New York, but for historical context, how does it compare to other supply chain disruptions we've seen in the past? Most notably, maybe for most of us, remember the supply chain disruptions back in 2020 during the pandemic.
Well, that was a supply chain catastrophe for different reasons. That was a global catastrophe, and it dramatically impacted supply chains. In this case, the effects are much more regional and much more specific. So, for example, in the auto industry, the Port of Baltimore is a significant importer and exporter of automobiles and light trucks, as well as machinery. Those are going to get rerouted, particularly to other East Coast ports, and those will get moved in time. So it might disrupt the auto supply chain for a week or two, but those will get disrupted. In the contrast with COVID, those were long-term, significant supply chain disruptions that were much harder to reroute.
Yeah, Brent, financially, what do consumers need to be worried about this? Could this drive up the cost of cars and things like that?
There will be some impact in the short term, but most of those impacts will be on consumers and families in the Baltimore region. The port employs about 15,000 people, and about 150,000 people are directly impacted by those jobs. Probably the bigger impact is going to be on the logistics chain. A lot of materials that would have come in through the Port of Baltimore and gone through some of the logistics hub there would have gone south on the 495 bridge. Of course, that's not there. That's going to add an hour to an hour and a half of traffic for those shipments. It's going to be very disruptive to people who live in the Baltimore area with those vehicles now not able to travel on that bridge. So short-term impacts, and certainly regionalized, probably not for so much so for the rest of the country. So significant, but not catastrophic is how I would describe it.
All right, Brent Moritz with Penn State, we thank you so much for your time, your perspective, and expertise tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right, turning to the Middle East, new details are emerging about the sexual abuse of Israeli hostages held by Hamas. This as the Biden administration continues to face fallout from the U.S. failure to veto a UN Security Council resolution for an immediate ceasefire. National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke has the latest. Caitlin, the Biden administration seems to be making a big shift in its position on Israel's war with Hamas.
Jenna, we've definitely heard increasing criticism from Biden administration officials on Israel's handling of the war with Hamas and also on the civilian toll in Gaza. But prominent Jews here at home say the decision Monday by the U.S. not to veto that UN Security Council vote will have consequences not only in Israel, but also here in the U.S. in November at the polls.
It will lengthen the war. It will make it more difficult for Israel. It is a terrible decision for America. It's a terrible decision for Israel. And it will drive a great many Jewish Democrats like me away from voting for the Biden administration.
Meanwhile, during a speech in North Carolina on Tuesday about affordable health care, President Biden was interrupted by pro-Palestinian protesters who said that Gaza also deserves health care, and instead their hospitals are being bombed, and they accused the president of being complicit in genocide.
They have a point. We need to get a lot more care into Gaza.
The U.S. has been dropping aid into Gaza, but the humanitarian crisis there continues. Jenna?
Yeah, Caitlin, circling back to the UN Security Council resolution that the U.S. failed to veto, Prime Minister Netanyahu, in response to that, canceled a planned trip to the U.S. by an Israeli delegation. What's the latest with that?
Well, as of this morning, Prime Minister Netanyahu was standing by his decision, saying that he hoped it sent a message to Hamas that Israel will not bend to international pressure. However, this afternoon, in a surprising reversal, the Prime Minister's office says the trip is back on. It could be rescheduled as early as next week. So we're waiting to hear a time frame for that. The point of this trip is to talk about the planned Israel military campaign in Rafah.
Yeah, when it comes to the hostage negotiations, Caitlin, with Hamas, there's really been no progress. 134 still being held, many of them women. What do we know about how they're being treated?
Well, Tuesday, the New York Times published the first ever testimony of a released hostage on sexual abuse. Amit Susanna testified that her captors sexually violated her repeatedly. Now, IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari called her account horrific.
This is a wake-up call to the world, to act, to do everything, and pressure Hamas to free our hostages.
Hamas has said it will not free the remaining hostages unless Israel stops its war. Jenna?
Caitlin, has there been any fighting this week in the north coming from Hezbollah in Lebanon?
Since October 7th, there's been pretty much near daily clashes between Hezbollah and Israel. Just this morning, a rocket attack on a town in northern Israel coming from Lebanon killed a 25-year-old man. He was in one of the buildings that took a direct hit. Now, Hezbollah says their attack was in response to an Israeli strike that happened hours earlier. Jenna?
All right, Caitlin, thank you very much. And coming up, the former president becomes a pitchman. The controversial new ad featuring Donald Trump trying to sell Bibles.
Welcome back. Donald Trump is selling the good book, urging supporters to pay $59.99 for the God Bless USA Bible. Inspired by country music star Lee Greenwood's famous song of the same name, it includes copies of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, Pledge of Allegiance, and more. According to the official website, this is the only Bible endorsed by the former president, and it's offered in the King James translation.
And here with us now is Jack Jenkins, national reporter with Religion News Service. Jack, welcome. So you've been posting about Trump's new Bible venture. What's been the response you've seen?
Well, I think it's been a polarizing moment, right? I think Trump achieved two things immediately by promoting this Bible. The first, as you know, the major subtext here is that he needs to post a $175 million bond in the next week, and it has been reported that he gets a cut of the sales of these Bibles. So this is one way for him to make money. But the other thing is that this is a chance for him to be able to reach out to his evangelical Christian and conservative Christian base. A lot of the things in this ad echoed a speech he gave recently at the National Religious Broadcasters convening. And so when he said things like that we don't worship bureaucrats in Washington, we worship God in heaven, that's a riff on a line he's used on the stump for years. And so aspects of this were kind of, him just being able to amplify a message he already gives. However, there's also been a lot of criticism. One thing that my colleague Bob Smagtana reported back in 2021 is that this Bible was actually controversial long before Trump put his name on it. When news broke in 2021 that Lee Greenwood was trying to get it made, there was actually so much blowback to the news about that publishers pulled out. And that is actually why it isn't the NIV translation, which was originally going to be the Bible, but the King James Version, which is in the public domain. It doesn't require you to purchase a license for it. So there's been a whole lot of polarizing reaction to this in the last 24 hours.
The video announcement, Jack, has drawn comparisons to the last time former President Trump very publicly promoted a Bible, and that was in the summer of 2020 near Lafayette Square. Your thoughts on why endorsing the Bible, the Lee Greenwood Bible, and why now?
I think, on one hand, as mentioned, I think there's a financial benefit for Trump in the near term. But again, I think this is part of Trump's longer play to continue to cater to his conservative Christian base. As mentioned, this is deeply controversial with a lot of Christians in the United States. People ascribed his ad yesterday as emblematic of forms of Christian nationalism. There's people who take deep issue with putting the founding documents in the same binding as the Bible, accusing it of being apostasy or heresy. But none of those complaints seem to necessarily puncture Trump's base, his conservative Christian base. A lot of people in those areas that have showed up to his rallies for years are likely to be inspired by this or see nothing wrong with this sort of promotion. So I think this is in keeping with his longstanding outreach to conservative Christians, and I would imagine him to keep doing that, irrespective of whether Christians on the other side of the aisle or even some of his conservative critics take issue with it.
Yeah, you've mentioned that there might be some kind of financial benefit for Donald Trump here. What is that? Mm-hmm. From what we've read, it's just endorsed by Donald Trump.
Right. We've heard from reporting at the Times and the Post that he might get a cut of these Bibles. and that there might, and also the holding company that they paid for it's a paid endorsement. He apparently owns that holding company. So the endorsement itself is a financial benefit to him. This is according to the Post and the Times. But even if he gets no money from this, as mentioned, this gets a significant boost for him in terms of attention. Right. Press attention has always been Donald Trump's friend, and it only continues to resonate with his evangelical Christian base and his conservative Christian base.
All right, Jack Jenkins with Religion News Service, taking time out of paternity leave to talk with us today. Thank you so much for being with us, and congratulations again, Jack.
Thanks, Jack.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Coming up, 1 year ago, a gunman stole 6 lives at a Nashville school. How parents are using their pain to stop it from happening again.
Welcome back. 1 year ago today, tragedy struck Nashville. A former student opened fire at a Christian school, killing 6 people, including 3 students.
It clearly devastated the community. And despite the pain, one group of parents is turning their heartbreak into action. CBN's Charlene Aaron has that story.
While memories of the Covenant school shooting continue to linger across Nashville, one group of parents is turning their grief into a tangible action plan to keep schools and students safe.
Let's go!
Body cam video shows Nashville police entering the school, racing toward gunfire to confront and take down the shooter, Audrey Hale. In the end, the shooting left 3 Covenant students and 3 staff members dead. Mary Joyce and Melissa Anderson, whose children attend the school, recall the day.
The feeling of complete helplessness on that day and trying to do anything to get to my child.
They could hear all of the gunshots, and the children, some of them, one grabbed the Bible and started praying. In their minds, as they waited in that moment, hearing what was going on around them, they were preparing to be next.
Their kids still feeling the trauma a year later.
My 9-year-old, now 10-year-old, she just turned 10 a couple weeks ago, doesn't sleep in her own bed yet. She still has nightmares. She is angry during the day over little things, and that's not our child. I don't know how to parent that.
Anderson says her son, a 4th grader at the time, refuses to open up about what happened.
That is heartbreaking in itself, because I don't want what he experienced on that 2nd floor to be locked up inside of him.
Covenant father of 3, Brent Leatherwood.
We now know that that evil that day came very, very close to 2 of our children. And that's hard to live with.
A bond these parents all share.
That grief really came over me in a wave a few weeks ago when I was sitting down with another mother in her home, and we were talking about what had happened. Our children were together that day, and just the emotions that I hadn't seen, because I try to hold those back when I'm in public. Those emotions came over me, and I was just angry that I have to live this life. I'm angry for our community.
That anger now the driving force behind a push for gun law changes and safe schools nationwide. Last August, Tennessee Republican Governor Bill Lee called a special session to address the issue.
We say, look, we are conservative Christian families who, I myself am a gun owner, our families are gun owners, and we own guns, yet we want safer gun laws. Those two can coexist, and we believe what we're asking is in line with the Second Amendment.
No meaningful legislation passed in the special session. With nearly 350 U.S. school shootings in 2023, she argues the inaction sends mixed messages to kids.
Children, we are going to send you to school to learn about our country, but wait, you might die today. And this classroom that you're learning in and your desk might be blown to shreds, and you might be in a war zone, and some of your friends might die, and you may die.
Leatherwood, former executive director of the Tennessee Republican Party and Southern Baptist Convention leader, says the shooting has deepened his faith.
So I don't want to say I'm in the same shoes as Job, but I think I'm asking some of those same questions that Job was. And I think that's okay, because I think our God is big enough to handle our questions.
He also calls for urgent action.
This is a place where I personally helped as a staff member usher through significant pro-life legislation. I think if we want to be consistent with that pro-life ethic, the same energy and earnest action that we do on behalf of that vulnerable child in the womb, we need to also do for that vulnerable child in the classroom.
While Covenant students have been attending classes off campus, plans are to reopen the building. As Easter approaches, many hold on to the hope of the gospel.
I ultimately pray for healing. I hope that we show witness to other communities that there is healing and there is also purpose in the pain, and that beautiful thing can come out of what happened in such a horrible, tragic situation.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News, Nashville, Tennessee.
Thank you, Charlene. All right, well, excited for the solar eclipse. Still ahead, tips for best viewing. Finally tonight, the countdown to the total solar eclipse is on.
That's right, in a couple of weeks, April 8th to be exact, the eclipse will darken the skies of America for up to 4.5 minutes. While it definitely will be a sight to see, one professional photographer has a reminder about protecting your eyes to enjoy the moment.
The most important thing I tell people is you really have to be mindful of the safety. You have to have the right equipment. Just being able to take your own picture of it, those big scene images of people around you, those are the ones that your iPhone will definitely get.
As a reminder, regardless of your vantage point, you'll definitely want to invest in a pair of solar glasses to take in the view. And I remember back in 2017, there was a group of us here in the Bureau that went outside in front and snapped some pictures.
I love it. The countdown is on.
Can't wait to see it. Well, thanks for watching.
Have a great night.